and welcome to Living One. I'm your host, Olivia Crossman. Living One is Kerulos' monthly webinar series, now in its 5th year. With guest speakers from around the world, we listen in to how people are bringing their ethics, minds, and lives into alignment with nature for earth and animal liberation and revitalization. We ask the question, we know what's wrong, but what does right look like? Most importantly, how do we get from wrong to right? When there is so much to change and to heal, where do we begin? What's the first step? What is the path each of us can undertake to make positive, deep, transformative change, not only as individuals, but as a collective whole? What is ours to do? Let's talk about it. Today is our first session of Living One for 2025, and we are so glad to welcome Tiant Mitchell as our very first guest. Tiant Mitchell is a psychology department peer assistant in a state prison in Western Pennsylvania, where he teaches cognitive behavior therapy-based classes and suicide prevention. He is the author of several books and associated programs, including Felons Are Fathers Too, Parenting Outreach Program, and Fatherhood Training System. The Correctional Solutions Institute and Freedom Consultation Group, which he developed while in prison to train other incarcerated fathers how to be exceptional fathers from prison. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that we are all currently on various different Indigenous lands. I'm currently on the ancestral homelands of the Council of the Three Fires, which includes the Ojibwa, Ottawa, and Potawatomi. This land exists also as a place of trade with other Indigenous communities, including the Ho-Chunk, Miami, Menominee, Sauk, and Meskwaki. The Kerulos Center for Nonviolence is located on the homelands of the grizzly bear, Takelma, Dakubetete, coyote, coho salmon, golden eagle, and gray wolf. So without further ado, we welcome Tiant Mitchell.
We got one.
Definitely, us too. Thank you so much for coming on. We're really glad to have you.
And indeed, I'm excited. I'm looking forward to being able to have a great series. Do a great series.
Yes, absolutely. Great, Mitch. Well, I think we are just going to launch right in. I'll record all of our pre and post introduction stuff after the fact, so we don't take up your time here. So we were thinking, since this is a series, if you just want to spend as much of today as you want just telling us your story, how you got to where you are today with the work that you do and everything that you care about and work so tirelessly at. Just Indeed. Tell us the story. Take us through it.
Okay. All right. So everything started on October 6, 1987. That's the day I was born. Unfortunately, I was born into some circumstances that weren't favorable. My mother struggled with addiction to crack cocaine and to alcohol. So I was born already into a situation that was challenging. And so I think that characterizes the rest of my life from then on out. But what I found out, and it wasn't until later that I was able to go back and in retrospect, that the experiences that I experienced at that time, right? So with my mother, with my father being out of the home, so we was raised as in a single household. It was me, my oldest brother, and then till later on my younger brother came. But it was the experience of witnessing her pursuit of the drugs, right? Mm-hmm. And the way I interpreted it.
Yeah.
So the way my child brain interpreted it wasn't, because I didn't know about addiction. I didn't have enough information to formulate that conclusion, right? Or to formulate that rationale. So the rationale I was left with was, mom and dad brought me into the world. Dad no longer wants to be here. Once I came, right? So that's one strike. The other strike is mom is in pursuit of this and she's never around to do what I needed for me. So the problem is not the drugs or the parents. The problem is me. Mm-hmm. And so this is the narrative that I concocted as a child, and it carried me along.
Yeah.
And so what I witnessed from that moment was, all this is in retrospect, there was a series of events that just logically followed that.
Yeah.
So if I feel like I'm not enough, or I feel like I'm worth less to my parents than these other things that I feel like they're in pursuit of, then now this starts to translate in my body, right? My body registers this, right? And then my brain and then my emotions follow suit. And so I started to seek out, other ways to matter.
Yeah.
And and unfortunately, as a child, um, it was just various ways that I would just try things, and then eventually my brother was like we call, like, in my mind, he was like the good child. So I couldn't be as good as that. So therefore, what I realized, I just went the opposite way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I realized, okay, I don't get attention. You're not going to come to school class. You're not going to do this when I'm doing good, but you have to come when I'm bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, you know what I mean? And this became my, on an unconscious level, this became my rationale for my behavior after that. And then one thing led to another. And then, I grew up in a gang environment. So, I'm involved in gangs and street life. And this became love. This became appreciation. This is how I became valued. I became valued as a member of, of the gang. I became valued as a member of this particular group and organization that we have to protect.
Yeah.
And this, you know what I mean? And so, yeah, that was the start of delinquency. And decades of delinquency from then on out. And it's interesting that I wasn't able to register that as that then.
Yeah.
And it was just going with the flow, and it was going with, see, and now real quick, what I realize in other people and myself is there is momentum. Once momentum has started and habit has settled in, and cognitive ease has settled in, like the opposite way is to even be aware of it, to be aware of your actions, and then actually to take the conscious steps to do something about it was challenging. But that's the story that led me to my first encounter with law, right, with the criminal justice system.
Yeah.
Now, did you have a question, or you want me to just keep
Go
going?
ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So once my encounter with law at that moment, I would act out. I was medicating with drugs because once I smoked some weed or something, or drink some alcohol that I started at 12 years old, these things kind of made things a little easier to cope with.
Sure.
But coping was the missing key, because I didn't know how to do that.
Yeah.
First, I didn't know there needed to be something to cope with, and then I didn't know how to cope. So going back a little bit, life was. I mean, looking back now and looking over, all the research that I've done so far, I realize this is what I'm about to say is not anomalous, right?
Yeah.
But it seemed like it was to me. So it was like the house. Compounded with neglect, right? But it's not intentional neglect, right? Because I realize now that wasn't intentional, but back then it felt intentional.
Yeah.
It felt like intentional neglect. And then when she would go to rehab or do different things, we would go live with different family members and different people. And as a result of that, different various abuses happen. You know what I mean? And then so as a child, there's this perpetual world of I now know it as victimization, but I didn't know what it was then.
Sure.
I just knew it was a state of, I guess it's just what's supposed to happen. And so between, various family members, and then even with my father, sometimes he's a really big guy, and he was really heavy into religion, and he felt my behavior was the behavior of the devil. And so in his rationale was, in order to get the devil out the child, you don't spare the rod. So he would beat me unmercifully, right? And on several occasions my grandma had to stop and jump in. And again, since then we've been able to understand what happened and apologize, and we've both grown. But these are the events that shaped the future.
Yeah.
And so this is now, I'm taking this into this life of this adolescent crime, right?
Yeah.
This adolescent delinquence, where I'm really just trying to discover who I am and discover what's going on. But it manifests itself in crime.
Yeah.
And so now I'm in and out of these institutions, and it was very heartbreaking because at the same time that I'm now struggling with my own crime, my own mental health challenges, and my own institutionalization, my parents are both struggling with their own. So, my dad was struggling with his own mental health, and my mom was struggling with her mental health and her addictions and what's going on in her life, because her life, she experienced heartbreaking childhood, right? Heartbreaking childhood that just devastated me. And then she's finally able to express it in a book she just wrote called Unmasked, but I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And so it was easy for me to point the finger like, oh, bad parent, until you realize what happened. Yeah. And then you're like, oh no, this is a logical result of experiences. And so the same thing started to occur in my life. And so while I was in these places, I would get excited. I'd be like, oh, they're coming to visit me. And then, for various reasons, they weren't able to come, right? And so in my mind, I created this narrative that said, although they're going to promise to come, although they may say they love you, you're likely to get a different result.
Yeah.
And that became a foundational interpretation of reality.
Yeah.
That drove behavior from then on out. And so it almost like became a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way, because it was just perpetual disappointment after that.
Yeah.
And so, and then that's how I ended up getting involved in crime. And from the crime part, I think it's interesting now that I write about crime in my newsletter. Crime is a behavior.
Yeah.
And if you look at it as anything, the value judgment of criminal is a secondary thing. So when you're trying to understand what's really going on and how to fix it, it's imperative that we clear away criminality of it and we just focus on the behavior part of it first. And when you look at that, I realized that many of us in the neighborhoods that I grew up in the culture that that I come from, is crime is a behavior. And then later on I wrote in according to actuation theory that all behavior is logical. So later on, fast forward real quick, but I developed a theory for behavior called actuation theory. And in actuation theory, I'm explaining, going back now and I'm applying it to the childhood so I can give a better context. All behavior is logical. So the problem is not with the behavior, right? It's with our assessment of the behavior.
Yeah. Because
we're viewing the behavior outside of a context it was created in.
Yeah.
Right? So until you get into the context of the person who, with their mind frame was to see this as an adequate or sanctioned behavior, right? You're not going to properly understand. So crime itself was a behavior, and what we did was, in pursuit of a goal, and the goal that I realize now is I call it to matter. So to matter is encapsulated six things, and that's to be heard, to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be valued, to be loved, and to be respected. Yeah. And those are all versions of the same thing. And I realize this is the human chase. All humans, I realize, are in pursuit of this. So it's just manifested differently. So where we come from, we're deprived of these things in a traditional home, in a traditional setting. And so now once we seek them, we now see them like distorted versions of them in the criminal underworld.
Yeah.
And so crime is more so, although there is a utilitarian, a utility about it, like I'm hungry, so I might need money.
Yeah.
That's the beginning from a Maslow hierarchy standpoint, right? But once I actually have enough money to feed myself, I'm now fueled by this chase to matter. I call it to get to Matter Mountain.
Yeah.
Right? And now, so although I wasn't originally a violent person, right? I didn't do violent. Actually, I was actually a scary person for real, because the first couple of times it was like, man, we're gonna go. There's other guys over here. We're gonna go get them. And I'm like, why are we gonna go get them? What they do?
Yeah.
What they do that?
Sure.
Why do we have to do anything to them? And it's like, man, what, you a sucker? And I'm like, oh no, I ain't no sucker. No, I ain't no sucker. He's like, all right, then let's go. And so now it's like I need to validate myself for my community, because we are social creatures, right?
Yeah.
And so this became the impetus for me driving. Now it's like, oh, well, you could have just said no. And I was like, yeah, in theory, that's right? But the thing we don't, practice in theory is not the same all the time.
Yeah.
And what I found, later in research is Brewer's research on, Marilyn Brewer, her research on in-groups. And there's a part that she says, and I'm paraphrasing here, but psychologically, we are so attracted to our in-group that we shape our behavioral norms and our cultural norms to fit. So we are accepted or not rejected as a legitimate member. That word legitimate member is so important.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so again, this looks anomalous to the urban street culture, but this is all cultures. All cultures, all people are seeking legitimacy. The thing is, what are they trying to be legitimate? What?
Yeah.
Right. And so, are you a legitimate Christian? Are you a legitimate Muslim? Are you legitimate? Are you a legitimate Chinaman? Or it doesn't matter. Whatever culture you are, you're trying to be legitimate in that culture.
Yeah.
And so, this is where peer pressure and these types of things take a hold. Is because I realize now that my brain was developed. I'm developed to acculturate, right? To indoctrinate my culture in order to survive.
Yeah.
And so this is where the crime and stuff starts to happen, is because if you notice, a lot of these crimes happen in the critical periods.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So first of all, they get locked in as youngins, right? Because this is what we see and hear all day. As a youngin, you got people smoking stuff and giving you guns and saying, hold this, let me see, and drink some of this and stuff, and this becomes perpetual. And then you get to the point where you have another critical period of adolescence.
Yeah.
Where the mind is still not fully developed, and so but you still have the impression of culture on you.
Yeah.
The culture says you are nothing unless you fit in.
Mm-hmm.
And to fit in here, you have to do X, Y, Z.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so me and Gay wrote about this in our article, the identity and the paradigm of crime, where we spoke. I was speaking about unless you are violent, you are nothing. Right. Like you have to be, you have to have the propensity for violence, because if you're a sucker, then see, sucker equates to the social hierarchy of nobody.
Yeah.
And if you take this biological research, and then you take the psychological research, and then you take the sociological research, and you blend them to overlap them, you start to see something.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And it says, it's not that I'm necessarily committing crime per se for the sake of crime.
Yeah.
A lot of people are committing crime for the sake of legitimacy.
Yeah.
And not just legitimacy in the social face, right? The social place, but legitimacy in my body.
Yeah.
My homeostatic system has become conditioned to now equate this legitimacy with homeostatic peace.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when I'm not legitimate on the social face, I'm not. It's almost a social death that occurs.
Yeah.
And in her amazing book, and Dr. Donna Hicks, in her amazing book on dignity, she outlines it in a way that says dignity, things on dignity can be interpreted and felt as if they were wounds, right? Like gunshot wounds. And so if my legitimacy is questioned or attacked, it's almost as if you're killing me.
Yeah.
This is how it's felt in the body. So anyway, once you understand these types of things like that, it almost makes sense to a degree, or it brings a little bit more sense to the seemingly senselessness of crime, especially in neighborhoods where I come from, where 17-year-old boys were at a party, one stepped on the other one's shoe, and they came out, he went and got an AK-47, and he shot him down. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh my God, like what the heck? It's like, that just makes no sense. It's like, well, I get from where your perspective, where you're standing, where your position, it seems, hello?
Hey, we hear you. Can you hear us?
Yeah, the whole system went down, so everyone cut off.
Oh boy.
We're back on though.
Okay, good.
So, alright, so now my timer set off, so just let me know when we get to 40 minutes.
Okay.
So I know. Alright. Are you ready?
Yep, go for it.
Alright. So, yeah. Well, in general, I believe where I was at was, speaking about the crime, and understanding in the context of its creation.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so, so long story short, if you look at it and understand it as legitimacy, and then understand how legitimacy is inextricably linked to survival.
Yeah.
Now you start to see things in a different context, because now it makes sense that this guy who just did 20 years and now he's released back into a community, a context in which the rules are written. Your legitimacy requires this. And although he came out with this intention to not do this, if he's not this, then he's this.
Yeah.
And he's almost essentially dying. And so he starts to suffer and suffocate in his own despair. Mm-hmm. And so what happens is he has to make an existential decision, essentially. Like, do I leave? Do I stay and die, essentially, right? In despair, or do I leave in the unknown world and go somewhere where I don't know, and then from the skills that I have, the prediction of my survival rate is low.
Yeah.
My success is low. And so it almost feels like I'm at a place where it's like, F it. And then when you factor in learned helplessness, and you factor in all of these other things, you start to be like, oh, okay, this makes sense. And it's not to make sense like let's license it, right? Or let's, we wanted to continue. Let's make sense of it so we can change it.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my story. So anyway, but at this time, we're running back. At juvenile life, I didn't understand that, right? I didn't know that was going on. I was just responding to my physiological and psychological promptings. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so because my system had already got conditioned and wired a certain way as childhood, especially from a insecure attachment style, these promptings were prompting me to say, hey man, you'll be nothing if you don't do this. These types of things.
Yeah.
These are obviously not conscious, but these are things going on inside.
Yeah.
So and that led to various institutionalizations. I was in many different. And then while this is all going on, I'm going through various mental health valleys and peaks, different challenges. And what I realized, I didn't realize this later, but looking back on it now, I realized as a means to make sense of what was then seemingly senseless, a crazy environment, I started to do things cognitively, right? And we got to, there would be these wild distortions, and there would be these wild imaginings, because I used to imagine myself as being somebody different. That was one of my ways as a child to escape the situation. But what would happen was I was just looking for ways to escape the reality as I perceived it.
Yeah.
And my argument now later in life is that most mental health stems from these types of things. And I think what happens is once I start the process of looking for escape, phrase it as radical escapism, because I'm radically I can't cope with this experience, so much so that my brain is almost like firing, my neurons is firing, and it's just trying to find anything. And then I think it starts to do this to catch up to these weird things, these wild things, right?
Yeah.
So they could be hallucinations. They could be imaginary worlds, because I lived in an imaginary world for a long time as a child, right? Well, that's a child thing, but I stayed with it as I got a little older.
Yeah.
And so I think these things manifest as mental illnesses. And I think until I was able to identify them and which I wasn't until much older. But people identified them and labeled me as things, and then in response to the labels they formed to me, they gave me medications.
Yeah.
They gave me different treatments that, in retrospect, I don't think they were good intentions, but I don't think they were adequate treatments.
Yeah.
And I think what happened is because it wasn't an adequate treatment, it almost exacerbated the issue.
Yeah.
So, for example, if the problem, let's say this particular version of mental illness is coming from a sense of powerlessness, right? A sense of inadequacy.
Yeah.
Then an agent of you're giving me a medication that zombies me out.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Like this only exacerbates the situation.
Yeah.
So I feel worse than I did before you gave me the medication.
Yep.
And so now I'm back to the same situation where the guy who has decided he's going to shoot this guy there's an existential crisis happening here.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, all right, do I stay zombied out and feel even worse, or I just say F it and try my chances without it?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So again, everything to me understands, and you see it from the survival standpoint. It's like, dude, if I'm going to die, then I'm going to die this way. I'm not going to die like that.
Sure.
So get it. So now, and because there's not our treatment, our mental health treatments were not as inclusive and open and responsive to the patient, right? And like what the patient said and experienced was almost irrelevant. Then proper care couldn't have been administered.
Yeah.
Proper treatment couldn't have been. And so now I feel like I remember. If you remember the 6 things, the first one is to be seen,
yeah.
and the second one is to be heard.
Yeah.
You're not heard when people are medicating you and you're not listening. They're putting you in straitjackets and they're putting you in rooms with padding. You see what I'm saying? You're not heard because you're not seen. You're not acknowledged. So now this is just exacerbating this psychological issue that's going on.
Yeah.
And so then you realize, okay, since y'all not gonna listen to me, I realize the best way for this to work is for me to just listen to you and then do what you say, regardless of how I feel, what's going on, so you can let me out of here.
Sure.
And then the treatment you're never treated.
Yeah.
You're just ducking, you're just tucking things, and then you go on, and then this gets from one institution to the next institution to the next institution.
Yeah.
So long story short, that is how I got to the first half of life. And one of the things that I realized I struggled with was interpersonal relationships.
Yeah.
So I tried to escape through many ways, but I realized, because looking back, my original rupture happened via interpersonal relationships.
Yeah.
It's almost like I'm always trying to go back and heal that moment.
Yeah.
Or those moments, and I started to do so through relationships. So I tried to be like, I was like, all right, well, somebody wants to be with me, we're together, somebody loves me, I'm whole.
Yeah.
Right? And then especially in the modern culture, that sounds blissful. That sounds Disney-like.
Yeah.
And that was the narrative that was, given to us. But I realized, obviously later on, that that's not necessarily the case, because I needed to be whole before I got into the relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So now, compounding all of these things together, and then self-medicating, I got to a point where I was just extremely destructive.
Yeah.
I was destructive. The whole span was a span of destruction that was projected on a world that originated for the self and by the self.
Yeah.
You get what I mean?
Yeah.
So I really want to destroy the idea of me that I've come to know, that I feel is in existence because of the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
You get what I mean?
Yeah.
So both the world and me are both the problem for me being me. And so from a solution standpoint, it's like I for long as I tried to destroy the world and it didn't go away, and I still felt the same way. So eventually it was like, you know what? I'm the problem again.
Yeah.
And I'm the common denominator, and so suicide became, the not easiest option, but the most logical option.
Yeah.
In my state of mind. And so I had various experiences with that, and various hospitalizations. And then it all culminated on October 12th, 2012, when in interpersonal turmoil with my wife. We were arguing and stuff, and but it was just the depth of up to that point. It was just like, yo, I don't need any more convincing that what I realized when I was a child has been continued through my life, and this is it. If I'm such the problem, then it's clearly that you need to go.
Yeah.
And so it was a attempted suicide by cop, and I was supposed to not make it that day.
Yeah.
And it was a really tough time, and I was really upset that I didn't that I made it, right. Well, not even so. I was really upset that I couldn't follow through. And so, long story short, unfortunately, everyone survived, right. I was shot several times. Dragged out. I wasn't able to walk, and long story short, I was booked and sent to the Allegheny County Jail. And at that moment, I was like, "You can't do nothing right. Dude, you can't even do this right."
Yeah.
And so I, unable to move. I was in a hospital bed, infirmary, and I was stuck in a bed. And those wounds, nurses had to come do everything. They had to help me use the bathroom. They had to wash me up. They had to come bring me food.
Yeah.
I was utterly powerless.
Yeah.
Now I thought I was powerless before that. I thought there was no depth of powerlessness that I didn't experience.
Sure.
But it was that moment when there was a psychological powerless, an emotional powerless, a spiritual powerless, and a physical powerlessness.
Yeah.
That was the eclipse that just, whoa. And I couldn't finish the job even there because I had no means to.
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean? And I was struggling. And so, I just cried. I just complained. I just cursed God. I did everything. But an amazing thing happened at that moment. I reached the bottom of the bottom and realized that once I reached the bottom of the bottom, I had found the top. And it was in this moment on this hospital bed, I write about it in my book, Let There Be Success, Creating the Life You Want While Living When You Don't. But it was in this hospital bed that it hit me. And it said, I was so focused on all the things that I can't do.
Yeah.
I was so focused all my life on all the things that I haven't been able to do, and why my life wasn't the best life, why I was born to this, and why I couldn't go to this and have these opportunities. I never focused on the things that I could do.
Sure.
I never focused on the things that I actually had and tried to make. So at that moment, it was like one of those seemingly out of body experiences. I'm laying on the bed, I'm crying and complaining. I'm just like, and I think I'm in some Vicodin-induced haze, right? Because these are medications that they're giving me for the wounds. And it was just like, man, I ain't gonna be, my life is gonna be over, and this. And then it's like, I can't do nothing. And then 3 words came to me. It was, you are able. And it's these are ordinary words, but the way that they came spoke back into history. Yeah. And it said, you felt you were powerless right here when you were born. You felt you were powerless when your mother did this, when your dad did this. You felt you were powerless at this moment here. You felt you were powerless here. And it almost like a flash of my life, all these moments that I felt utter powerlessness till that moment right there. And it spoke to that to say, in spite of all of that and during all of that, you were able.
Yeah.
And that wasn't so powerful for me.
Yeah.
It changed it was a paradigm shift, right? Yeah. And so I'm looking, so I turn around, so I have a cellie in my infirmary, and I'm like, what? And I was like, what? Like, nah. And then and I thought about it. Like, now I'm doing it intellectually, I'm thinking about it, like, what am I going to do? Like, in spite of all that, you still were able. And so in spite of what's going on right now, you're able. And so as proof, I said, Cellie, come come help me. Now he's in the infirmary too. He has pins in his foot. And I said, come help me get up. He's like, help you get up? Where you going? I was like, man, I'm about to walk. He's like, you can't walk, dude. What are you doing? I'm like, all right, well, just help me sit up. And so long story short, he helps me sit up. He limps over, waddles over, and helps me sit up. And that was it. And then, so once I sat up, right, it was a miracle itself, I strapped his boots on. We have these big boots that protect our feet. And then, I had foot drop because of my I got shot in some of my lower extremities. So I just held on to him and I just said, help me stand up. I stood up and then I sat down and then I cried.
Wow.
Because I realized it's about the way that I perceived my whole life was the result of why my life was the way it was.
Yeah.
And I realized no matter what from this moment, I know I'm about to do 100 years, right? I know I may lose my family, but I know that in spite of what comes from here on out, the way I perceive it and then my effort and my actions afterwards can change the whole narrative. And that's why I go back to saying how important narrative is, because now this new narrative is that in spite of what's going on, I am able, and therefore that's where we're at. So that's how I got here.
That's an incredible story, Mitch. Just unbelievable. Yeah. Thank you so much. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No. I was saying no. That's exactly. But it's not even just my story. The reason why I want to share it, the reason why is because nothing changed at that moment.
Yeah.
It was just a shift in paradigm.
Yeah.
And from there, I now was in vigorous pursuit of what I can do.
Yeah.
And so it started from what I can do. So I did what I can do. I learned to me and myself would then get up and try to walk from then on there and just keep practicing. I would stand up, and then sit down and keep doing that. We did our own physical therapy. And then eventually I started getting the back of the wheelchair and started walking. But long story short, I started walking soon. But then it just said, all right, if I can do that, what else can I do? Yeah. So I started doing other things. I started trying to learn more. I started studying how to do this, studying how to be a better parent.
Yeah.
Because that was one of the things that the registered to me is like, dang, dude, you're about to go do 100 years in prison and you have a child and you told yourself you weren't going to be your parents and you turned out to be even worse.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow. So I got Meg and Meeker's books. I started getting all the books I could get on parenting. This is in 2013. So I just started vigorously getting books and learning how to be a parent, and then going back and trying to repair relationships with my family to where I could be able to be a parent as well. But anyway, I don't want to cut you off. I just wanted to say that part.
Absolutely. And I'll let you know, we have about 5 minutes left. You're in the East Coast, right? So it's about 12:10 your time.
Okay.
And if there's anything you want to add to wrap up there, I want to leave time for that, but everything that you've shared is just incredible, and it's really, I can't wait to hear the rest of your arc in our upcoming conversations, because it's really amazing what you've described here, and just the journey that you went on psychologically, and just your inclination even as a young kid to be thinking about these things and wondering about what makes us who we are and how we get where we are is just really inspiring. So thank you so much for sharing all of this with us today. It's been incredible.
I appreciate it. No problem.
Mitch, this is Gay. Well, that was fantastic. Hey.
Hey, how you doing?
We're just beginning.
Yes.
Maybe you can, in the last few minutes, just kind of give a preview, just a little bit in terms of, what you started to create in your teaching and things like that. Okay. Which will be following up in the other series.
Yes, of course. So from the moment that I realized you are able, it almost became a challenge to myself to figure out what I can't do, right? Yeah. Under any circumstances. Yeah. And so then it's like constantly challenging myself. So walking became quick, but now I'm trying to play sports, and so then it became an intellectual challenge once I started to realize that when I applied myself, although I was in the slow classes in school, I wasn't really slow. Yeah. So now, as I'm reading these books on parenting and I'm sharing what I know with other people, I'm now starting to help other fathers right? Learn what I know, and then we're trying to learn what I know and we're applying it. So from there on, I end up just continuing studying. I end up creating various parenting programs. Fellows of Fathers 2 is one of them. The POPS Parenting Outreach Program, that's another spinoff of the parenting program. So I went into studying psychology and how the body works, and that's how I came up with trauma courses. One's called Unbreakable. I came up with various courses in various areas. Me and my daughter actually have a great relationship now. She wrote several books. She wrote books. I wrote several books. And I taught thousands of classes to people because my mission became at that moment maximize your fullest potential.
Yeah.
In spite of the circumstances.
Yeah.
And so I realized if I can do it, I'm going to use my life as an example to show and help other people how to do the same thing regardless of what they're going through. So that's what we look forward to next week.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, we are looking forward to that quite a bit, and we'll connect with Liana to get a nice collection of those resources that you mentioned, all the books that you and your family have written and everything that we can link with the recording of this so people can check them out and learn even more about everything that you've shared today.
Indeed. And hopefully we can get hopefully we can do something where we can get some free ones out to some people first, maybe who register, who comment or something. I don't know how it works, but maybe we can figure out some way we can get some free ones out.
That'd be fantastic.
Definitely. And also your newsletter, the subscription to the newsletter.
Absolutely, it's free. So we want to make sure we get that available as well.
Great.
So sounds like a plan.
All right, we'll put all of that in there, and this has been just amazing, Mitch. I can't wait to speak with you further.
Indeed, likewise. And so off the record, well, on another note, look what I got.
Oh, look at that.
But I want you to see it though. I want you to see it. Like we're not playing. Like I want you to understand.
Oh boy.
Like, you see this underline. Like we're not. Like it don't matter what page you go to. Like this has been studied, and it's been studied to the point where I think it's imperative that we create a course out of this. Especially for parents in general, but especially for mothers.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Well,
that's something Right. So what I want to do is I'm going to get some copies donated to the female prison library.
Yeah.
So that's
you want to supply that information. We can get that out.
Okay. Yep. So I just.
And maybe in one of your sessions, I'd really like to hear about the animals in the evolved nest and your read on it. That would be fantastic. What are you taking away? What are you learning? What resonates? That'd be fantastic.
No, indeed. I just feel like it's just amazing. Like any page, like I told you, just notes everywhere. Like this one says, all animals are sense makers. It's like, what? How powerful is that? Like goes back to what I was just saying about all behavior is logical. Like we're all trying to make sense of what's going on. So anyway, fantastic work.
Fantastic.
We will be definitely following up with that.
Yeah, we'll see you in the next session.
All right, I definitely would do that. And I don't know if she gave you the list of visit times and if you was able to pick another session.
No, I don't think we've gotten them yet, but we'll write an email and get them.
Okay.
That's fantastic.
I'm excited.
Yeah,
Us too.
So fantastic. That was great.
Indeed.
Thank you so much. Big hugs.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll be in touch.
All right, indeed. It was a blessing. Take care.
Likewise.
Appreciate everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much to everyone who joined us for another great Living One conversation. We have already announced our lineup for the first Living One series of 2025, so be sure to check our website, Kerulos.org, to keep an eye on your email and Kerulos social media for more information as we approach our very first guest in this new series on February 14th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And starting for the very first time this year, we will be offering a very exciting course add-on to our usual Living One conversations for those who wish to deepen the learning. You can learn more about this on our website, Kerulos.org. As always, if you enjoy Living One and feel called to support Kerulos, Living One, and all of our sanctuary residents, please consider donating at the link on our website. Once again, thank you everyone for sharing your time with us. From all of us here at Kerulos, we really appreciate you being here. Have a great day and see you next time.